I'm here today with Janel Vitale, who is a coach for shame-free relationships and sexual empowerment. Though based in the San Francisco Bay Area, her message has a wide national reach through her TikTok channel. Her passion is empowering people to overcome shame and fear in their intimate relationships, to create the deep connection and fulfilling sex they crave. An expert in emotional intelligence and vulnerable communication, she holds a BA in communication from USC and a sex and relationship coaching certification from Somatica Institute. You can find her on TikTok. Her videos are awesome. Instagram, YouTube at Love with Janel, and on lovewithjanel.com. So welcome.
Hi.
It's
Great
been
to be here.
Yeah, it's been so fun to witness the videos you've been making and everything on social media. But I just kind of want to backtrack because when I met you, you're working at OAEC, in the more farm type community.
Yeah, it's
And
like sustainability, permaculture land. Super
yes,
different than what I'm doing now.
yeah, super magical place. And
It
you
is.
were preparing to go on a trip on the Appalachian Trail to hike. And just being like a witness from the outside, it seemed like that trip and then the PCT, which you ended up going on as well, super transformational. I feel like I'm reading a book right now. Maybe you're familiar with it, Untamed.
I'm
Have you
reading
heard of
that
it?
right now too. Of course we both are.
It's so good. I have it
It's
right
so
here.
good. I love it. Totally.
And well, so in the book, she talks about like releasing ourselves from these cages. And
Yep.
we often don't even know that we are in these cages because of our conditioning, because of how we were brought up, because of everything that we are shown in our lives, especially relationships and like to unshackle ourselves and to realize that like we don't have to live this way. We get to create our lives. And I wonder if going on those trips, like, was that part of that? And like, what did you discover? Maybe we'll start there.
Yeah, those trips were huge for me in terms of figuring out how to really look at shame and discomfort that had been a deep part of my life up till that point. Because for as long as I can remember, I've always been deeply interested in sexuality, and I've experimented with polyamory and all these, pretty unconventional ways of thinking about sex as a woman, raised female in this culture. And going on these long distance journeys by myself was my way of just like constantly coming up against discomfort every single day and learning how to use it as medicine and a tool instead of as a debilitating saboteur that's getting in the way constantly without me being conscious of it, right? Like you were saying, the cages are subconscious. And so for so many of us, and so to be in a situation where I didn't have to think about, juggling all the different tasks of work. I mean, there was just one goal: was get up, hike every single day, and the pure discomfort and fear of, running out of food, coming up against wild animals, hiking through the rain for multiple days, sleeping by myself in the dark, night hiking, I just confronted so many things I'd never experienced before. And it was really transformative, And as I'm saying this, I also recognize, being white and raised upper middle class, like what a privilege it is to go on a journey where I'm like up against my discomfort every day, because so many people are constantly bombarded with discomfort and don't have the opportunity, it's not healing for them to like go put themselves in an uncomfortable situation, right? So I just want to acknowledge that. But yeah, for me, as someone who was kind of raised in this like picket fence box of like, well, you're gonna, this is what you're gonna do with your life. You're gonna get a job and you're gonna get married, you're gonna have kids. And it was really liberating for me to just like extricate myself from all those expectations and find myself again.
Yeah.
And doing that has really empowered me to want to help other people do the same, and in whatever way that looks for them with their intimacy, right? I mean, people who are asexual, demisexual, queer of any kind, monogamous, non-monogamous. Like, I want to help people figure out what's right for them and to like unshackle themselves from cultural myths about sex and relationships.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to speak to that, the privilege piece of just like, I think our parents, eh, they want to give their children the best of everything, right? And she talks about this in the book too. I was just reading. And
Yeah.
um does that to make us the best of people, right?
I loved
And
that line about like, we laser focus on giving everything to just the children we're assigned instead of figuring out how to improve things for everyone. And then we just mess everyone up.
yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes being in those challenging situations, and I actually, nature immersion was a big thing, a part of my upbringing too.
That's great.
My dad grew up in northern Minnesota, and he was a guide in the Boundary Waters. His parents were outfitters, and so when I
Wow.
was growing up, we were going like pretty big, hard hikes and type things. And I was 14. My dad sent me to Outward Bound. And like it was
Wow.
really uncomfortable, having to hike these long days. And proudly, there were four girls and four boys in the trip I was on. I was the only girl who made it on that whole trip because
Wow.
there was just like a lot of things that came up and health challenges in different situations. But yeah, I mean, it's empowering to go
Yeah.
through those challenges and
Yeah.
also to disconnect, like to not be on our devices and kind of gain some greater perspective on life. Yeah.
Right. You're unplugging from the rat race in so many ways. And, I think that people who have a lot of privilege right now, this is a time of great awakening in terms of being uncomfortable, right? It's like when everything was really escalating with the Black Lives Movement in the past couple months, there's been a lot of talk about what's it like to sit with discomfort for the sake of growth, for the sake of examining your stuff and being self-aware. And I think doing the work of self-awareness growth is useful in so many different facets, right? From social justice to your own relationships.
Right. Right. And can you tell us just how you open to like that you might be different in relationships? When did that first come to you? When did you start experimenting with different kinds of relationships? How did that all come
Yeah.
together?
I mean, so much is about exposure. And growing up, I went to Catholic school and I was mostly around other Catholic people, white people. Um, I always just thought I was broken. I always just thought something was wrong with me because I looked around at every single woman I knew who was, a mom of one of my friends, basically. And I didn't see women who were single, who didn't have kids. I just didn't have exposure to anyone who wasn't like kind of in the more stay-at-home mom role. And I didn't have exposure to anyone who identified as anything but like heterosexual. um, I don't have any memories of childhood like just being exposed to anything. So when you're not exposed to alternatives to like the standard narrative, what else are you supposed to think, right? But just like something's wrong with me. So I definitely had shame because I had this very like Eve-like curiosity about sex. And from a young age I was really curious. And we grew up, right, we're like early 30s, so we grew up with like internet porn before parents knew about it. Like that was my
Mm.
experience of like obsessively as a middle schooler, investigating like what is all this, and then feeling such shame, like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm going I'm going on this journey. But it was fun for me. I was like really into erotica. In 8th grade I was writing erotica. So I was like having a blast with it and super passionate and interested in it, but also just felt like I must be like a deviant because that's just, what else could it be? And then I started to meet people. It wasn't until after college, really, when I purposefully started putting myself in alternative situations. Like I worked on cruise ships and I lived on a bunch of intentional communities, and I started to just meet these like open-minded people who thought differently. And I was meeting single people, queer people, um, people who didn't have, I mean, single adults, right? Like people who didn't have kids, who were choosing a life of like creating, you know, businesses instead of having kids or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not to say that that's not a great life choice. It's just like I literally had no exposure to anything other than this very particular like picket fence standard narrative. Um, and so to just start meeting all these people with alternative perspectives, that was the first time I ever even heard someone mention of like ethical non-monogamy or polyamory, which gave a voice and a term to this way that I kind of felt like I oriented to relationships. And I was like, oh my God, you know, sometimes naming something like that is really empowering, because you're like, oh, I'm not just like some weirdo. I'm not just like alone in this like strange deviance. Like there's other people who are doing this in an honest, open way. Like what? That's amazing, you know? And so I think it's really like, I love making TikTok videos thinking a lot of my followers, you know, are Gen Z. And it's like, oh, if I had had a me when I was like 13, I would be so much happier. I would have messed up so much less. Yeah. So I'm definitely reparenting myself, you know, through making content for the next generation.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah. And what does relationship look like for you right now? What is that?
Well, I have an amazing partner that I met at Burning Man in 2017, and we both are in an open relationship, but neither one of us has like deep love relationships with other people. But he has a date with another woman tonight. You know, we're being very cautiously like opening back up to that with coronavirus stuff. But yeah, for both of us, this is interesting to explain. We both feel more free and alive when we don't feel like trapped by a relationship. And I tried to explain this to someone who's like staunchly from like the more traditional paradigm, and they were like,
Yeah.
wait, you're telling me you feel trapped by your partner? And I was like, well, I don't feel trapped by him, but for me psychologically, I do feel like a trapped claustrophobic feeling when I don't feel free to like explore affection and connection in like kind of a more natural, fluid way. That's just what's true for me. And that also happens to be true for him. And so we're a really good match. But that's not true for everyone, right? And so I think part of like uncaging yourself is being like, wait, what's actually true for me beyond like the social convention? Maybe the social convention is true for you. That's great. But maybe it's not. And so how do you figure out what alternatives there are and embrace them, not have any shame about them, but be like, okay, here's how I am, and there's other people who I can create this with.
Yeah.
So yeah, he and I were really upfront about that when we met at Burning Man. And I was like, you're perfect for me. Yeah. So that's how it all started.
Yeah. I think the key piece is that honesty. And
Totally.
for me too, you know, my partner Michael, and we're married. And when we got married, it was kind of thinking like, is it realistic to think that neither of us will ever feel attracted to someone again, or like ever, you know, and just to know that like, okay, that's probably something that's going to happen. It's probably something that happens in every relationship.
Totally.
And just like to know that, hey, let's just keep that conversation open and come to each other with honesty when and if it arises, rather than just like, this is this thing I can't ever talk about.
And I think even just that, having that openness of conversation is in our culture an open relationship, which is like staggering. But I think, you know, I made a TikTok video where I said, hey, just a reminder, it's very human to be attracted to other people and you don't have to act on it, but it's totally normal and it doesn't mean you don't love your person. And the amount of responses I got where people were like, no, if you love someone, you will never be attracted to someone else. I was like, oh my God, this is such a deeply entrenched myth that causes things to go underground, that causes cheating and depression and shame. Like I've really seen those things with the people I work with. So for you and Michael to even just be like, let's just be real that this is a human thing. It doesn't mean we don't love each other. Maybe we'll act on it. Maybe we won't, but we're just being honest. Like that's profound. And that's, I think the world would be a better place if more people were like that with their partners. I think there'd be less conflict and fighting, but it takes a level of maturity, right? And a level of confidence to be able to believe that.
Yeah. I mean, think of how many couples like cheating happens. And yeah, so I just think of that like it's um my parents' generation, for example. It's like if someone were to cheat, it's just like the God forbid, the worst thing, and for the kids and everything, and divorce and all these things. And to just think if there were other options for them, how things may have been different.
And the weird thing is like those people were cheating so much. Like I'm thinking about men, especially in other time periods where it was just like the hush hush norm to have a mistress. Um, for me, when I work with people, I'm all about don't cheat, because what cheating means to me is going against the agreements that you have set with your partner and with yourself, right? And cheating doesn't mean having sex with someone else if you have an agreement that that's an okay thing to explore, or you have to talk about it in advance. Cheating is a fundamental breach of trust and a breach of your own integrity. And I've been there, because before you acknowledge these things that we're talking about, that it's totally possible for humans to connect with more than one person and to be attracted to people, the shame and the guilt causes you to go underground and do things outside of your integrity, which just makes you feel bad, which probably causes cancer and depression. I mean, literally stuck in your body, right?
Yeah.
And then like the devastation that can cause for relationships is so intense. And so how do we get this culture to a place where we can just communicate about these things? And that doesn't mean it's easy. And that's the thing with facing discomfort. It's like every relationship is going to be uncomfortable, and you can choose what level of discomfort you go to. Some people are like discomfort personal growth junkies, and some people are like totally not, and that's fine. But no matter what, there's some level of discomfort. And so how do you have the tools to deal with that together? That's what I'm really interested in helping people with.
Yes. Do you see jealousy come up a lot with when you're supporting or working with people, and like
Oh my God.
how do
So
you
much.
help that that
One of
conversation?
my biggest pet peeves is when people are like, you shouldn't feel jealous. Like
Mm,
jealousy, something to obliterate. And it's like, for me, every uncomfortable feeling is not something to obliterate. It's something to invite in to dinner. Sit at the table in front of it and go, I see you.
yeah.
Why are you here? What information do you need me to know? Right? Because that jealousy is happening because there's some unmet need or an insecurity or a boundary violation or a fear, and excavate that. And there's so much juicy information there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think often it is when you have an unmet need, when it's like my partner is maybe I'm not getting this thing that I really want from my partner, but then I see him going out and doing that with someone else. And then of course that's going to be like the trigger.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was talking recently about a letter that my partner sent a postcard to another woman who he had been dating, and out they were just friends. And I could not believe the level of like rage jealousy I was having. I mean, I'm talking like, he'll come home from having sex with someone else and I'll be like, that's awesome. No jealousy. But in this particular instance, like the jealousy was so intense, and I was like, what the heck is going on here? And I was like, oh, I want him to write me more love letters. So I didn't
Mm,
freak out or blame him. I was like, what I realized from this experience, I'm embarrassed to say that I was really jealous of this postcard thing. And what I think it means to me is I really would love for you to write me more love letters. And he was like, great. So now I have this like closet full of love letters. It's so
oh.
awesome. And also recently he was talking about someone he used to have sex with, and normally that, like, we talk about that and we're like, oh, that's cool, but I felt so much jealousy. And again, the reason in that particular case was because we haven't been having a lot of sex because it's quarantine, and like our libidos are kind of just like meh. And
Right.
I was like, yeah, I think, when we're not having a lot of sex, I don't know if I can really hear about your past sexcapades, just
Mm,
that's a boundary for me. But normally I love hearing about them. So yeah, there's just a lot of information there you
yeah.
can go deep and look at those things and then explain them to your partner in a shame-free way. And the way I always advise people to deal with any uncomfortable feelings in relationships, like jealousy, is to start with, I'm really scared to tell you this. I'm really nervous to tell you this. To like really set the scene with like your own like discomfort, and to be like, but the reason I'm telling you this is, or like the intention for me is like, I want to tell you this to get closer to you. So like there's two parts to this, like intro is like your own emotional experience to disarm them, that you're like, I'm scared of this, but I'm telling you this because I want to get closer to you. That's my intention.
The vulnerability piece, it really can help let down the guards.
Yeah.
Yeah. What tips do you have for couples during COVID, like quarantine time, and just if it's like you're around the same person again and again, day after day? Because I think
know.
having space from each
So
other
hard.
does create magnetism and attraction. So
Absolutely.
how have you
Yeah.
been handling,
I think,
navigating?
yeah, I mean, exactly. You said it, like the more psychological distance you can have from someone. I mean, I don't want to say the more, but psychological distance and mystery definitely creates desire, right? Esther Perel talks about that in her work. She's a famous relationship therapist. And um, yeah, it's really tough to do in quarantine, to have any psychological distance, and I think really happy relationships over the long term, you're investing in yourself just as much as you're investing in your partnership. So if you can't have at least physical distance from each other, maybe you live in a town where you're literally on lockdown, like you cannot leave without a permission slip. I know some countries are in that situation. So how can you invest in yourself right now would be my best advice. Like, what's the language you want to learn, or the knitting project you've been putting off, or just really figuring out, okay, how can I invest in me in a way that doesn't include my partner, and this little corner of my life. And then you'll feel reinvigorated. They'll be reminded by that subconsciously, oh, this person's not just an extension of me, right? This is a separate person, and that's hot. That's kind of like part of what fuels desire. So that would be like bare minimum. But I think if you can leave your house and like go for walks and, by yourself, there's like social distance walks with other people. I think that can be really nourishing too. And there's a big myth too in our culture that you need to do everything with your person, or else like you're betraying them. And that myth is so strange. I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't understand that one. I think it's like the Disneyification of, of love, but it's like, yeah, I think it is really important to have some kind of psychological space.
Yeah. And I feel grateful that, yeah, just in my relationship, we've had periods of time where it's like one person wants to travel on their own, and like that's totally supported and okay. And even though at first it might be like, oh, I'm going to miss you, uh, it always adds to the relationship, because like you come back with new stories and you come back like a new person, and you get to fall in love with each other, and just like that whole experience of having space.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's just not that many opportunities to travel anywhere right
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even just like going, I've been going on backpacking and camping trips, of course, because it's my passion. And
Mm.
there's some places where nature's still open. Obviously, a lot of national parks aren't, but that's been really rejuvenating for me. I went on a solo trip, and I would recommend that for people who like the outdoors. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tough time. It's a really tough time to like have any space.
Yes. And I'm curious about like coming out into the world with your true self,
Yeah.
and especially talking about sex.
Yeah.
Like, how you said you come from a Catholic background,
Oh
like
man.
how did you address that of like, this is who I am, and just the fear of like, what will people think, what will family think? How was that whole journey for you?
Oh my God, it's still so stressful for me. And my family is really great. Um, I think there's just so much internalized fear of rejection, and we're social animals, so of course we're like deeply afraid of like pissing off or losing our attachment people, and so the fear of like disappointing them or being rejected is so profound. Um, yeah, I mean, the first time, I can't remember the first time I started talking openly about like open relationships and polyamory, but my parents kind of just did like an eye roll, like maybe this is a phase kind of thing, but they weren't like, that's horrible. Um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely have some conservative family members throughout the country, and I just, you know, at first I was like, should I like be blocking them on social? And I was like, I don't want to live like that, like this is who I am. They're going to find it probably. It's okay. So, I mean, we just don't talk about it. But I still have such debilitating shame reactions, Meredith. And I think this is part of why I'm doing this work, because like I said, I'm trying to like reparent the part of me that's constantly grappling with like deep internalized shame. So whenever I post something that feels kind of edgy, I have the like quickening heartbeat, like the pit in my gut. I have to go for a run. I love how you look anxious, just me talking about it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely like have the somatic experience of shame like almost daily, which maybe means it's the right thing to do. I there's a lot of debate about this, especially with women, like exposing ourselves on social media. Like the memoirist, the woman has to like expose all these things, and I've definitely heard women writers critique that that's like how we have to expose ourselves in order to be like taken seriously or whatever. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think I used to do this thing where I would expose myself or like my truth as this kind of like, screw you, everyone, like I'm me, this kind of like rebel attitude. And I think it's really transitioning into more of like, I want to be in service and I know this will help people, but there's still like the shame clinging on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think for women especially, it's less common that we have people stepping forward and saying, "Hey, I want to do my relationship differently."
Yeah.
And it's shifting for sure, but that conditioning can run deep, and especially we want our family to love us. Like it's
Oh
a
my God.
basic human need, and
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah, I love how we're entering into a time where negotiation is replacing clear rules and gender norms. I mean, this is a very fascinating time in human history, and I think that people are starting to be like, okay, well, I guess we can design our own lives and our own relationships, and that's really a first, which is exciting. And I think a big part of unpacking your shame is really feeling your feelings. I'm sure I know you're someone who's really body based, somatic based. I think like feeling the physical sensations of heart racing, lightheadedness, pit in the stomach, like being with those physical sensations, meditating, running, walking, having sex, like whatever it is that helps you like be in your body and like really feel your feelings, move through them, express them. I think that's the power. That's the power right there of being in the body, this like traditionally feminine space, right? Not in the mind, but in the body. And I think this is a really powerful work. The sex and relationship coaching methodology I use is all about combining like left brain with body wisdom. And I think that's really where the juice is in terms of overcoming, obstacles of shame and social conditioning. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's powerful times. We're in a lot of ways like this generation pioneering a lot of shift and thinking
totally,
of like letting down those cages.
totally.
Um, can you tell us more about TikTok and like how what you're creating there and how that came to be and like and what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I have to thank quarantine for TikTok. It's
Mm.
like I was working with people in person so much here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then that opportunity just died a very hard, sudden death. And so yeah, I mean, I thought about more traditional marketing, like I guess I should, put up a ad or something and start doing online sessions. But then I don't know what happened. Someone like talked about TikTok, and I went on and I spent 2 full days just like looking through videos, and I was like, this is incredible. And I found therapists who were using it to educate, and I was like, this. So I just jumped on with like full force passion and just started making like 3 videos a day. And at first, not much happened, but it's like the wild west of social media right now. So if you're creating consistent good content, it's like your numbers explode. So like I've been on there for 3 months and I have 250,000 followers.
Wow.
Crazy. It's so awesome. And so like I love seeing the responses of, because like real people are seeing it versus like a lot of the other social, I'll put something out and it'll just be, crickets.
Yeah.
So I love seeing the impact on people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think for me, the goal is just to really help people look at shame and discomfort and figure out how to use them as medicine and as tools for understanding themselves better and creating the lives that they really want.
Yeah. Can you walk us through just like some different types of relationships that might be unconventional and that maybe our mind has not even fathomed, like could
Totally.
be?
I have a blog post called 9 Unconventional Relationships That Work on my website. But yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I met a married couple who didn't live together. And I was like, what the heck is wrong with you? That was literally, I didn't know. I was like, what? And then when I lived, and this was all when I was on intentional communities, I was meeting all these like people who were living differently. So that was one. And then I met a poly family where there's 2 dads and a mom who were raising a kid as like a collective. And I was like, what? You could have an asexual partnership where you don't have sex with each other. Maybe you both have sex with other people, who you are very clear with them that like this is a, sexual relationship. And it could be a long-term relationship you have with the people you're having sex with who you're not married to, right? So there's an idea that if you're not married, your relationship's less than or invalid. But I know a man who was married to a woman who transitioned into a man, and they're still married, and he's a straight man. He doesn't make him gay. So he has sex with women, and he has long-term serious relationships with women who know that he's married to a man, and they have him and this, man have a deep emotional bond, and they live together and they own a home together. They have a financial relationship. So they didn't want to give that up. And it would be okay if they did, right? I mean, everyone needs to live for themselves, and maybe that wouldn't work for people. I'm sure it wouldn't, but for them, that was the best choice. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's just various, like me and my partner live 3 minutes apart from each other, and we're not married, but we're really, really passionate about each other and very committed to each other. And, people would say, well, commitment is getting married. It's like, okay, well, you can define commitment however you want, So what does commitment mean to you? What does loyalty mean to you? Does fidelity have to mean never having sex with anyone else again? Or does it mean showing up for each other in your growth, even when it's difficult, supporting your partner's evolution? That's my definition of it, but that's not everyone's, and that's okay. But like, how about we get out of the habit of thinking that these things only have one definition, and seeing that other people can define them how they want, And I think a lot of arguments of like the conservative Americans or like the family values people would be like, no, there are these very specific definitions of how a marriage is supposed to look, how a family is supposed to look. And if you're not doing those things, it represents the degradation of society. And I think what I would say to those people is that the degradation of society is from people feeling like they are subjugated, that they're trying to fit into social structures that are not serving them, right? Yeah. So it's very confusing to me to hear about the degradation of society and see like, well, we don't support social anything in this country. So why don't we let people find their tribe within the larger tribe and support each other and live their best lives? Like, why are we saying society has to look this way, but then we don't invest in social anything in this country? It's very odd.
Yeah. And it's hard, just what's happened with religion, of course, of just like putting a box around something that is, you know, like the essence and the spirit of something that is so big, and saying, well, it has to look this way and it has to be like, and I think that's where a lot of the pain, and I have to say, I've worked with a lot of women. I do like healing the womb and healing of shame, and a lot of women that come in with the Catholic
Mm-hmm.
programming, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like sexuality and all of that. It's like, oh, the programming has been so deep that it's like we have to do a lot of work to uncover in those
Yeah.
spaces.
And I don't want to shame, like, spirituality or religion, because I think in a lot of cases, having those like containers is really beautiful for people. It gives them some guidelines, some frameworks, it gives them community. I think where it's only detrimental is when it's literally like anything outside of this is just completely off. It's off limits, it's
Mm,
wrong, right? So
yeah.
it's really important to me to embrace people. For if people are really passionate about religion, that's so great, right? And like, can you be a religious person who's like, this container is so great for me, but I recognize it doesn't work for everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah. Would you have any advice for someone who's maybe struggling with living as their true self and kind of waking up to like, hey, I've never quite felt like I fit into these different boxes, but is not yet at the point of
Yeah.
really taking on like and designing their own life in that way?
I think the internet is everything. There's so much community online, and you can
Yeah.
find so many different groups of people. I think it's really about community and finding a tribe and a like-minded people. And I've definitely had some debates with clients and colleagues about when is it valuable to put a label on yourself, you know, and when is it not. And I think putting a label on yourself can be really useful if you're like, I am blank, I am, you know, gray asexual, and so I want to meet other people who identify as that, and it's like, oh my god, these other people have my experience, right? Or if you are like non-monogamous, you're like, okay, I want to go online and, you know, find Facebook groups or, you know, apps that are specifically designed for people who are like this too, so I just don't have to feel ashamed and I can meet other people. I think that's so powerful for helping to unpack who you are and what you want, and to let go of shame around it, to feel some camaraderie. I mean, humans are social animals. So, as I said earlier, we need each other to thrive. And I think that's what's so cool about the internet. You know, it's not the same as like real in person gatherings, of course, but
Yeah.
if you live in a conservative small town, that might be your best bet.
Yeah. What is the vision that you are imagining for this world? What's the vision of like what you would love to see people living, embodying?
So much emotion happens when you ask that, because I have such deep fear about the state of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I had my fantasy world, it would be people really living more collectively, you know, in groups of people with chosen families that really shared their values, and like more resource management on a smaller local level, and more acceptance of different ways of thinking about spirituality and religion and um, you know, sexuality. Yeah, I think, you know, all the time I spent on intentional communities really made me see that collectivism in a small groups is so powerful and so beautiful, and so much can get done, and you can choose to do that with people who are like-minded with you. But you know, our social systems right now just aren't set up for that, right? Like, tax benefit wise, legal wise, like, you buy a house with one person, you get married, that's we income share in little groups of two. You know, that's how America works. So it would
Yeah.
be really amazing to see a world where there were other options for people to um, maybe like live in more tight knit communities with other like minded people. I feel really really passionate about that as an idea, but do I have faith that's going to happen? Not really. What
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see for the world. In terms of just relationship and sexuality stuff, though, I think what's actually realistic and more achievable is for because of the internet and because of the dissemination of information about different ways of living, I think what I'd really like to see is for, people to be able to be like, yeah, mom, dad, I'm experimenting, or I'm like, I'm a woman and I'm dating a woman this month, and like next month, like, yeah, I'm dating a man. And for it to not be like, wait, so you're gay? Wait, so you're straight? It's just like, yeah, of course you are. Like, great. It's just like to see people as just more fluid and exploring themselves through the mirrors that other people provide. Um, I think another thing is like just like gender in general. It's kind of painful for me to see people having like gender reveal parties, because it's just kind of like, why don't you just like let your kid just like be who they are? And maybe the gender reveal party is kind of like a little overkill. It seems like kind of old school. So
Mm.
yeah, for me, I just think like the movement towards people really not really fitting into the binaries is very interesting, and I would love to see a world where people are just not fazed by that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
What are you excited about in your work right now, or what's coming up? Anything that you want to share?
Well, I'm really excited about an online course that I just launched that's all
Mm.
about helping people reparent their inner child and looking at how their defense mechanisms and their sexual desires are both linked to unmet needs from early in life, which is
Wow.
based on long history of psychoanalysis. And that course like has very specific exercises and containers for either individuals or couples to really work through that together and have, or alone, like really do some introspection on, okay, like what happened to me earlier in life and how is it manifesting in the bedroom? So like desires from tantra to BDSM, like there's this wide spectrum of ways you might want to heal unmet needs in sex. And we judge and shame a lot of different things, especially something our partner wants that's different than us. We instantly go into a place of like fear and defensiveness, and we think we're bad if we can't meet them in all their needs. So we shame them instead of feeling our own feelings. And so the whole course is all about unpacking that and figuring out how to create win-win communication, not just in the bedroom, but just like in conflict, and to have compassion and empathy for each other's defense mechanisms and desires. So that I just launched last week. So I'm really stoked about that. And I'd like to offer like more of a recurring membership group really soon too, so that more people can have access to me at a lower price point, especially like seeing how many Gen Z and younger millennials are following me. It's like, I really want to help people, and I see like thousands of messages. I can't answer them all on my social at this point. So how can I like create a very affordable, accessible container where people can ask me questions, and I can like give people kind of like weekly growth assignments. So that's definitely like the next thing on the horizon that I'd like to
Wow.
create.
That's so exciting. And who
Yeah,
knew that, yeah, the youth, the next generation, this would be such a big part of this work.
it's
That's really,
very amazing. Yeah, I know someone messaged me, of the messages I managed to look at, someone was like, I feel like no one but you is talking about this stuff. And I was like,
mm.
can that be true? Maybe just no one else is talking about this on TikTok, but I don't know. I guess like for me, I know I'm not just talking about sex, like, all right, here's these sex toys to try this position. Like, I'm really
Right.
interested in like the communication and the psychology and the vulnerability and the emotional intelligence behind sex. And there definitely are other people talking about it, but I guess of our age group and younger, there's not. So I'm honored to be like really helping people think through that, of our generation and Gen Z. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited about that. Man, I wish I wish I knew of someone talking about shame-free relationships and sex when I was like 13. I could have really used it.
Yeah. I think it's true. I'm not really seeing many people talk about this. So it's definitely a unique and needed just, domain to be working in and to be helping people and answering these harder questions. Which another question just came into my mind, like, I'm sure you are full of like tools and communication skills and things like that. Do you have like a favorite tool that you use with your partner that maybe we could integrate into our lives?
My partner is so emotionally intelligent. He teaches me stuff every day. And he taught me a trick I use a lot. So I and a lot of people are terrified of their own needs and like feel super ashamed about them, right? We live in this cowboy culture where you're not supposed to be needy. So when I used to have to express a need because it was literally like killing me, I had to express it, it would come out as like a nag because I was so worked up about it that it wasn't coming out right. And he was like, hey, why don't you just say, I have a request? Just lead with that. And then you can say the thing. And it just like, it sets the container. It makes it so that the person knows they have a choice to say no, because they do. It makes it so that you don't feel like a jerk for having a need because you're not. So I think that is one of the best little communication hacks ever for relationships, is to be like, Meredith, I have a request. I would really love it if you would take out the trash tonight, right? Versus like, why don't you ever take out the trash? That's how it might come out if I'm like, it's building. I don't know how to say it. Finally, boom. So that's one of my favorites. So thanks, babe. Thanks, babe, for teaching me that one.
That's great. Do you have any closing words, anything you want to leave people with? And I'll just wrap us up with a short prayer.
Yeah, my closing words are for people to really do an investigation within themselves of what level of discomfort is acceptable for you in your intimate life. Like, what are the things that give you that kind of heart racing feeling where you're like, okay, I'm kind of uncomfortable, but like not so much that I'm traumatized? And where are the places where you're like, that would be so devastating, like I'm having a physical reaction that's too intense. So I think that's a really good investigation for people to do, right after listening to this. Is like, okay, where are the places where the discomfort is just enough, where I'm leaning into edges and learning and growing there? And where are the places where it's so intense that like I wouldn't grow, I would just be traumatized? I think it's a worthy excavation.
Yeah. That reminds me of just like yoga and being in our bodies and like where is that edge where I'm going to grow and where am I hurting myself? And that's powerful to just have that awareness and in our own bodies and in our intuitive sense.
Totally.
Beautiful. Well, I'd love to just take us back into our body, into our breath, and just so much gratitude for all the wisdom that you've shared today, Janelle. Thank you. And to everyone listening, just to invite you to really allow these gems, these seeds to marinate and to grow and to continue to open and expand the possibilities of where have we been putting ourselves in these cages? What do I want to let go of? What would it look like for me to live my life as my most uninhibited true self? So many blessings. Namaste.